Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another Neki broadcast. Today we are playing Earth Day Cake again, and we are taking risks. Now, this is a particularly interesting map, Thousand Stings Garrison, simply because it is a very wide map. So if you look, the distance between the leftmost village and the rightmost village is quite significant. Therefore, it's quite difficult for especially a Drake player to defend this. Now, imagine one would have a chaotic opponent swarming from the north and swarming to these barricades, right, through these barricades all the way down to these villages, and at the same time redirecting some of his troops towards this particular vulnerable village. Not to consider a sneaky scout trying to get a hold of this particular village, which is so painful to defend and cover, especially when you are focused on the main attack on the left-hand side. So the fact that it only has 7 villages, right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, makes it even more difficult to defend, because if one loses a village, it means it loses 1/7 of its total income rather than 1/8. As I said in the beginning, Drake is particularly vulnerable here. Why? Because let's say you get an attack which splits in 2 or even 3, I would say, directions, then Drake really has trouble, let's say, placing a unit on a village and then forgetting about it. Let's say I would have been Loyalist versus Orc, right? So if Orc had 5 grunts or 4 grunts and an archer here, sure, I could have let him get this village and then I could have mounted a defense on this side, simply because some of those 5 units couldn't have reached this village with it being too far away. At the same time, if there was another grunt, another stray grunt here and a wolf here, not a problem. I could have simply parked a spearman here, and really even 2 grunts wouldn't have been enough to kill this spearman. The spearman would have been incredibly efficient in defending the village with 60% defense. Same goes for the wolf, right? Calves are quite resilient, and you know, a calf here would have been able to deal with a wolf by itself. However, Drake units are like glass cannons. They deal a lot of damage during the power phase, but during the opposite phase, they really shatter. So their only strategy is to run, avoid the enemy power, and then as the power shifts, as the power balance shifts, fight back with a vengeance. So imagine me doing this with Drake, both on the left side and also on the right hand side. This would mean me losing at least 1, 2, 3 villages. So 3 villages, even for Drake, it's difficult to come back from such a setback. And you would imagine, I mean, Drake units, they need to stay in a massive flock. And imagine, okay, I would say these 2 villages I would be able to get back. However, I find it difficult to believe that I could fight off with the remaining forces. I could fight off a 60% villaged grunt. So it's incredibly challenging, especially as player 1 versus a chaotic rush. So I knew when I was Drake on this map that either I'm fighting a passive faction like elves or dwarves, or I'm fighting loyalists, or I am probably in grave danger, because versus chaotic I will struggle. Therefore, I was aware of the fact that I couldn't play a standard game. So what does standard means for Drake? Standard means retreating, letting your opponent getting your most vulnerable village, and then fighting back and regaining your village while getting some kills during your power phase. So I wasn't going to be able to play standard, and I was going to take some risks. Okay, with this being said, with introduction to this map, which I don't think I've discussed before on my channel, perhaps once, I'm not really sure. Let me know if I've had any videos regarding this map. So without further ado, let's see what I actually did in this game. I would say full map. Okay, so I knew that I was going to struggle. And I wanted to recruit a glider, but not more, simply because of mobility, scouting element, being able to grab all these, funny thing about it, again, it only has 7 villages, but they are so spread out. The initial recruit in grabbing villages is also challenging, especially for player 1. So, and at the same time, I didn't really want to invest in clashes from the beginning, simply because they are slow. So I was hoping for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I was hoping for a quick fighter, which is, I think, what I got, if I remember correctly. So I'm going with fighters simply because I can grab villages and it allows me to have more bank for recruiting more units. Anyway, I had no idea my opponent wasn't dead, so in hindsight, perhaps going with fighters first was a good idea. Now, my opponent is doing a very strong recruit. So as you can see, he has a lot of unit diversity. He wants a unit to get this village, doesn't waste too much gold, knowing that this particular unit going back would need a lot of time to participate in the first attack. So this means, this recruit here means I want to be efficient in getting villages with minimal impact on my first attack. Ghost is an excellent village grabber and an excellent backstabber. So that the Ghost can, grab this village, then immediately start putting pressure on these villages, try to do a run by, right? Which is incredibly effective versus Drake. And of course, 1 vampire bat for scouting and skeleton archer and adept. Why not? I'm surprised he didn't get a skeleton fighter. So these 2 recruits were again excellent versus Drake. Oh, 2 adepts. Well, that's a bit risky from his part. I mean, imagine I was anything else except Drake. So I would say this is a lucky recruit, non-standard recruit. I would have personally recruited a skeleton fighter, but I guess with 2 adepts, you could always transition into more adepts or a skeleton fighter if you discover that the adept strategy is not efficient. Now, again, I had this Drake fighter, which was quick, and I put the glider back in the hope that look, I could have my Drake fighter forward, perhaps intimidate the enemy, and I believe this one was also quick, and I was able to grab villages with my leader, and this is where I recruit 2 clashes. Now, in hindsight, what Earthcake did, well, it didn't quite do it. I mean, adepts are core units, but look at his unit diversity before recruiting the 2nd adept. Now, clashes, they are also core defense. However, I should have, in hindsight, taken into account the fact that I am incredibly vulnerable to chaotic rush, which means orc or undead. Versus orc, I could still exchange some blows, I feel. I mean, clashes in villages, they are not that bad versus orc. They're still bad, don't get me wrong. However, they are not that bad. However, clashes in villages, they are absolutely useless versus adepts. There is no way you can hold ground versus undead. So from this perspective, recruiting these many clashes was a bit risky. I should have recruited burner in hindsight here, just to achieve unit diversity, or perhaps a skirmisher. Skirmisher is a strong unit to have. You need at least one skirmisher. Skirmisher can be used versus adepts, and in case of a 60% village, it can also aid in defending versus orc, right? So you can put him on 60% to cover some of you can't rely on him centrally to defend versus orcs, but perhaps you could make, let's say, give an example here, clasher, perhaps this is a bad example. For example, here, clasher, and then a skirmisher on the village on 60%. So basically you are forcing orc to attack one of the clashes simply because the skirmisher could die, but the skirmisher could also deal a lot of retaliation. Plus, in hindsight, this would have been a 60% village for the skirmisher to hold, and in case of a stray unit from undead, so let's say all the adepts would have been here, in case of a stray unit from the adept, the skirmisher could have held his ground. So I said that the drakes have no 60% fighters that they can rely on. They have the skirmishers, however skirmishers have an incredibly low health pool. Anyway, enough with the rambling. So from this perspective, this was a mistake. I should have recruited a skirmisher or a burner. A skirmisher would have also allowed me to have more bank to recruit a burner later on. I would say, well, a burner it's a gamble. Skirmisher would have been a bit better with the potential of recruiting a burner later on if needed. Anyway, let's see how our Earthcake played at this moment in time. I believe he knows that I am 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No, he doesn't. So, okay, he's just scouting around. Not a problem. Getting villages. And he doesn't recruit anything at this moment in time. Standard village grabbing. Guess nothing unusual. At this moment, he's going to come pouring down on my villages soon enough. Now, in terms of what I did next, I saw that he's in debt. At this point, I was a bit scared, to be honest. These clashes are simply useless versus archers. And this particular leader, Arbiter, is the worst leader to have versus undead. And I started recruiting more fighters. I'm not sure that was the best decision. Fighters are great simply because they can, I mean, I saw that he had, I'm not sure whether I saw the adept or not. I believe I did, or I didn't. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I didn't. But I saw this adept for sure. And it's just when I saw the scout here, I said, okay, probably it's not going to be such a strong attack. I should probably build up my fighters, my fighter numbers, and then I will be fine. But again, there's really not much you can do versus undead. Perhaps, again, in hindsight, it would have been a skirmisher and then a burner, simply because I have no reliable way of dealing with this ghost. This ghost can be extremely courageous at night. At this point, I saw the adept. Probably I should have scouted first and then made my recruits. This was another mistake from my part, and I even say adept land simply because I am seeing loads of adepts. Okay, more adepts, which was strong recruit from Earthcake and another skeleton archer. Strong recruit. I can't really go for these adepts. Sometimes you would see me attack into undead, but I just don't have the numbers. I mean, the clasher cannot really reach those adepts. So from this perspective, perhaps the clasher should have been a bit more to the left to put more pressure on the adept placement. Anyway, what was done was done. So again, I scouted, and immediately I switched into skirmishers, seeing 2 adepts. Imagine I had 2 skirmishers now. I would have been in a much better position to defend, I feel. I was trying to prevent this bat from getting that village, also staying away from adepts. And this is when I already started taking risks. I mean, not that much. Here, for example, the adept would deal 15 during dusk. So 15 times 2, this would have been 30. And the bat deals maybe 3 damage. So 3 times 2, 6 plus 30, 36. There is no way, no matter what happens, that he can kill the glider. So I'm just staying away from harm's way. And at the same time, you'll see me do this strategic movement. I'm putting the clashes here in the hope that I can again put pressure on the adept placement, right? I want to hit the adepts with the clashes, especially since there are no bones to defend the adepts at this point. And if you look here, I have 4 units, whereas he has 2 adepts and 1 vampire bat. Another reason why I took my clasher here was to keep 2 fighters on this particular side, on the right hand side, and you will see me do something, well, not, I wanted to say something extremely crazy, but it wasn't crazy. So the fighters, they can perhaps catch the ghost. Also, they have ranged attacks, so I thought fighters would be better suited in dealing with the ghost, whereas clashers can deal a lot of damage to the adepts, even during nighttime. So that was my thought process at this point. Also, I didn't want to end up having all my fighters in villages while the ghost has the perfect placement for a run by, and then the skeleton puts pressure on me. I wanted to be the aggressor. I wanted to, again, try to put pressure on his villages in return, simply because it felt like he was going to focus a lot on this left-hand side. I didn't want to be boxed in with absolutely everything. I was trying to prevent the situation that I described to you in the beginning of the game. You know, having pressure on the left side, having pressure on the right-hand side, even the ghost trying to do a run-by here. I was trying to preempt that by pushing my units forward, trying to threaten villages myself, which, by the way, with Drake, if, for example, he had, let's say, 1 adept here, this would have been absolutely a failed attempt. Anyway, he doesn't seem to care all that much. He has pushed his skeleton forward. You see, he's waltzing in with his skeleton. He knows that there is nothing I can do about it. It would be highly inefficient to attack the skeleton with my clashers at night. So he can do whatever he pleases. At the same time, regarding the placement of his adepts, you see, he even pushes it 1 more unit forward. He is... okay. He does not seem to care. We shall see. I don't remember. You know, this hit with the ghost. If my fighter would have hit once or twice, it would have been incredibly difficult for this ghost. This ghost is all alone, and I can see that with my Drake fighter here. Well, it's not exactly all alone, simply because I have the skeleton archer threatening this village, so this particular fighter cannot really help that freely. But if I had a few more hits with the fighter, other than 0, it would have been much better, and this ghost would have been in serious trouble. However, this didn't happen. Now, he covered pretty well the village with the walking corpse, and I didn't want to risk. Now, if you look, I could have taken this village if there was no way for me to know. So I could have simply taken the village with, this is for you to remember for the future. If you see a lot of movement on the left-hand side, perhaps it would be better to simply get this village, even if, I mean, imagine this adept would have been recruited here. 1, 2, 3, 4. My Drake fighter would have been absolutely destroyed. But there was no way for me to know unless I scouted a bit, and then if I scouted a bit, my fighter would have been somewhere in the middle of nowhere, while this ghost would have gotten this village. So I was kind of forced, given how weak Drakes are at night versus undead, I was kind of forced to play defensively. And you see my placement here. It is just enough to prevent the ghost from taking the village. I'm trying to delay. I don't want to be exactly in this village. I want to keep an advanced position. I don't want the ghost to do whatever it wants. I want to be able to have at least vision on what's coming for me, and also keep the option open of surrounding the ghost. Anyway, now regarding this adept placement, so I could have hit this adept 4 times. However, I feel, I mean, it was a quick, resilient adept. Even, let's say I killed the adept, it would have been incredibly difficult without this skirmisher. So if I had the skirmisher in range, if the skirmisher would have been quick, I would have gone for these 2 adepts. Killing 2 adepts would be absolutely amazing. However, killing just 1 would not be enough. I mean, he would have had 2 adepts to kill my drakes, and then skeleton archers to deal quite a lot of damage. In hindsight, however, this would have been perhaps my only choice, going for the adepts. It would have been definitely, one way of taking risks. I am going to go, let's say, 20 plus 20, that's 40 damage. 40 plus 15, that's 55. 55 plus 10, that's 65. Surely 65 damage will kill an adept. If the other 2 adepts are going to hit and they are going to kill my drakes, well, that's it. But I could perhaps, if I was a bit lucky, I could have not killed. It's very unlikely I killed the other adept, but at least get him low enough so that I could kill it next turn. However, just dedicating all these units for the adept would have left my villages open. The bat could have been incredibly efficient in pillaging, and I would have lost. I would have thrown these units into the meat grinder. So it was a bit sad to see, I mean, that these adepts could just waltz in like that. However, having so many, I would say, expensive units like these clashes. Imagine I had 2 skirmishes, it would have been much better to deal with all these adepts. These clashes are incredibly useless against adepts. I could have made a move. That was one way of taking risks, but I didn't. I was still in the mindset of playing safe. Or, better said, I was in the mindset of taking different kind of risk. So you'll see in a second here my unit placement. Okay, so this is my unit placement. As you can see, I don't want to let the undead player get 2 villages on first watch. Probably it would have been better to let him get the villages, right? But I didn't want to. Also, I'm putting this clasher here, inviting basically the adepts to attack me. However, if the adepts go this far, 1, 2 skirmishes plus leader, plus another clasher, plus this fighter, I was already confident. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I had already 6 units on those 2 adepts. I was already confident that I would have been able to kill 2 adepts. 2 adepts for 1 clasher. That would have been a great exchange. Plus, I would have been able to recruit my leader and made use of my leader. That would have been great. So I was not too bothered about him attacking this clasher. However, I also didn't want to give away 2 villages. Perhaps it would have been better to give away 2 villages. And I took a risk here with this fighter. Again, it might not be that I was in a bad situation, but at least my perception, especially given this map, was that I shouldn't let undead have 2 villages. Then it would be really a problem, especially if these skeleton archers get comfortable in the villages. In the end, it would be very difficult for me to kill them without a burner. I would have to save money for a burner, then I wouldn't have had enough units to attack these adepts. So I said to myself, look, I need to take this risk. It's a 42 hit point Drake fighter, so let's say he gets 2 out of 2 from the adept. That is going to be 38 plus 1 hit from the bat. That is going to be 43. Therefore, my Drake fighter would be dead. So I was banking here on either 2 bat misses, which is a bit unlikely given that I'm only on 40%, or on only 1 adept hit. And that is, I mean, it's 50-50. So if you compute the probabilities, the probability of the adept missing, let's say the probability of the adept hitting twice, hitting both his hits, is 50%. So the probability of anything else happening is again 50%. So here I had a 50% chance, perhaps a bit more, you know, given the potential bad misses, 50% chance to survive. So I took this 50% risk. So I said to myself, I'm in a difficult position versus undead. I am willing to take this 50% risk. Because if I'm just going to give away villages, I'm going to fall behind, and I feel that 50% is better than, you know, slowly losing the game, slowly but surely, right? So this is what I said to myself, and this is the risk that I took. So I feel that the map is against me. The matchup in the context of the map is against me. I'm taking a 50% risk. If he comes here, makes a miss, then I have 2 skirmishers ready to pounce. Well, it depends. He could attack here, but then I would have a clasher, a skirmisher, and a fighter to pounce, and that would be absolutely brilliant. So I'm taking that risk. So I'm extremely focused on this side. However, I don't have too many units on the right-hand side, so it would be interesting to see how the game played out. So he uses this position to be away from my skirmisher, and he is going to get 2 out of 2. So that was me losing the bet. I took the risk and I lost. So you know that this is what happens when you risk it. And here I am getting hit 3 out of 3 with the skeleton archer. So this was another risk that I took. Again, I didn't want him to have 3 villages, right? So let's say I went back here, then I would have had to, using the same mindset, I would have had to go back here as well. So normally this particular Drake fighter should have had 23 hit points. Instead, it has 15, which is a scary amount to have. Now, I'm already in a difficult position, especially since there is no real answer to these skeleton archers. I don't have a burner. I don't have money for a burner. I only have 18 gold. Perhaps the best unit to recruit at this point would be a fighter or more skirmishers. And when you are stuck on skirmishers and fighters, you know that things are bad. And I'm going for this adept. I'm only getting 1 hit. But basically, again, 1 hit out of 4, that is a bit unfair, I feel. Again, 0 out of 4, that is also a bit unfair. So minus 50%, minus 52% inflicted this turn. So my plan was to use all these units to kill 2 adepts. Imagine I had the fighter alive, that would have been much easier. Again, I went for this adept. So you see, I hit quite well on this particular adept. So luckily this dies from 2 units, I don't need to use my Drake Glider, which frees up a unit for myself, which I intend to use on the Ghost. I mean, this particular fighter has ranged attack, so does this fighter. With the Glider, considering that there is a 12 hit point Ghost, I should normally be able to kill it. So I'm getting 6 here, which is absolutely brilliant. However, I'm also getting a lot of damage in return. And as you can see, this is minus 50% cold, and the Ghost has a cold attack. However, I'm happy with the damage, but this particular fighter cannot hit the Ghost at all, and it receives a ton of damage in return. That is the problem with Drakes, right? So not even the Glider, which should have had marksmanship, is able to hit the Ghost. So again, I took a gamble here, thinking that I could perhaps kill the Ghost. I don't kill the Ghost either, and now this particular fighter is dead. So you see how well a Ghost can fight against Drake at night. It's absolutely ridiculous. So even a Ghost can hold its own versus Drakes, which it's scary, to be honest. So I lost the bet here. I lost the risk here. I lost the risk here, I feel, because I lost the fighter and these guys did absolutely nothing to this adept. So pretty much the game is over. I would say at this point the game is over. So I had a 50% here. It's difficult to a 50% chance here of coming on top. It's difficult to quantify the risk on this side, but I feel that I should have killed the Ghost. And what he did was basically start destroying my Drakes, and yeah, I've already lost 2-3 units. There is no way I can fight back during the day. There is no way I can recover these villages. The only way I could have played without risks, or with minimal risks, is because you never play without risks. You can always miss everything and your opponent could hit everything, would have been to basically pull out of this village, pull out of this village, pull out of this village, and as soon as something bat or adept captured the village, attack those adepts. So from this perspective, this is how perhaps I should have played it. So I should have taken no damage and dealt a lot of damage in return. However, I would have dealt a lot of damage in return versus 60%. And this is what happens when you attack versus 60%. It's not a lot of damage at all. And I should have waited a bit more. Perhaps I should have retreated even more, because it would have been second watch. So I would have been in an absolutely terrible position. Well, with the stats a bit better, I would have been fine. So took the risks, failed, no reason to complain. Happens. Not always when you take risks you win. So you see 2 out of 2 from the adepts. That is a bit painful. I needed some misses. At least this particular adept has learned how to miss, but it's already too little too late, I feel. Finally, some hope at dawn. So I was trying to kill the adepts. They are the targets that deal a lot of damage, and okay, 0 out of 4 again versus 60%. Unfortunately, as Drake, you need to hit 60% now and then because it's the style of play. You will have to retreat, let the chaotic faction get the villages, and then attack it back. So from this perspective, it is painful to watch what is happening here. And I'm going for the Ghost. Finally, I kill the Ghost. However, it's just I just don't have enough units left to mount an attack. So I did kill I think I did kill 3 units, so the Ghost and 2 adepts, but I lost 4, and that is just not how the way you play Drake. Perhaps I could have retreated I could have played a game from behind most of the game. I wanted to take risks. This is what happened. Imagine the adept missing, me having the fighter to pounce on the adept. I would have probably had enough firepower to kill the adept much quicker and get another unit on this particular village. Perhaps killed the other adept. So with 2 adepts killed, the game would have snowballed out of control for my undead player, but for my undead opponent. But it happened the other way around, and I have only myself to blame for taking risks. So taking risks can also backfire, not as you've seen in my previous videos. So I think I conceded pretty soon, as far as I can remember. This adept is just absolutely fascinating. He just doesn't get hit at all. Even forgot this particular skirmisher to move it. I'm not well, so I believe, yeah, it's finally the burner that I could afford, simply because I lost too many units and it freed up some of my supply. It's not really much else to see. It's a story of a player taking risks and those risks not paying off. Sometimes you could do if you feel that you are in a difficult situation, or you could choose to play through that difficult situation and slowly but surely fall behind and hope that a swing of luck, which is, again, it's a different type of risks. You are playing from behind and you are hoping that in the grand scheme of things, overall, the random number generator will generously pull you out of that difficult situation. It's there are always shortcuts that you could take, and perhaps with a less experienced opponent, they wouldn't have taken this particular risk. They wouldn't have engaged. They would have just taken this village. They would have brought more adepts. But to be fair, there was no reason why he shouldn't have done it. He should, with all the force brought forward, the adept hitting from here, if the adept got one hit, it would have still been a strong attack. Anyway, I hope you guys liked it, and I will do, I believe, one more video about risk taking, and if you want to see more, please let me know. Otherwise, I will just be going back to my previous style of casting. I shall see you, ladies and gentlemen, later.